My guest today is Kiri Masters. Kiri is a leading analyst covering retail, media, and marketplaces. She is also the host of the Retail Media Breakfast Club, which generates new content almost every day. She writes for Forbes and for The Drum, and she is a member of the IAB Commerce Board. She has also built and sold her own e-commerce brand, so she brings experience as both an operator and as an analyst to this space. Kiri, I am so looking forward to this conversation.
I'm so glad to be here, James. And I want to recall how we first met, which was at the live ramp up event in SF. We had no idea who each other were when we sat down randomly at lunch next to each other and we get chatting, and we just had so much in common and we had never crossed paths before. It was total kismet.
It was absolute pleasure to meet you. And for those who are just listening in, we are not from the same country, despite some similarities in our accents. I'm originally a New Zealander. Kiri, you grew up until, I don't know, what age did you grow up in Australia?
I left when I was 24, so
about the same time.
My hand. Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
Hey, let's start at the top, because I have a pretty general audience. Everybody is in some sense digital media or pricing, but retail media networks, commerce, it's a very specific thing. Can we just start with definitions? In particular, how do you view a retail media network as being different than a commerce media network? And how is that different than what people might think of as traditional digital advertising?
Yeah, this is a great question. And a lot of people with a lot smarter than me have been thinking about what is the definition of this truly. And the IAB in the US has actually come out with very specific definition of all of this stuff. So if you are a etymology nerd, I think maybe go check that out. But how it's generally thought of is commerce media. If you think of two buckets, commerce media is the big bucket. It's all types of media that a enterprise can run natively. It could include airline media, so on the seat backs, on the app that you use to connect to the Wi-Fi. It could include financial services media, like Amex and Chase have commerce media networks now. It can include travel like Marriott Media Network, Lyft, Uber. So that is the broad bucket. And then in that sort of Venn diagram, a very, very large piece of commerce media is retail media. And it is still the vast majority of what we would call commerce media as a total. Retail media comes in three fun flavors. We have on-site retail media, which is the sponsored product ads that you see cluttering up all these retailer sites. And off-site retail media, which is a retailer that is extending their audience to be leveraged by an advertiser off-site through social or search or connected TV or elsewhere. And then finally, in-store retail media, which can include, again, definitions that can get very specific here, but it definitely includes digital screens. And some people would argue it also includes more of the more traditional kind of shopper marketing or trade marketing displays that are paper and other types of trade marketing vehicles as well. But that gets into a little bit too far into the weeds than what I'm usually prepared to veer into.
Just while we're on definitions and differences to the broader digital media category, when I first started working with retail media companies, it struck me that they have to pay more attention to their partners and advertisers. When I was at Yahoo, I'm ashamed to say, to some extent, we didn't worry if an advertiser wasn't seeing the performance, because there were 100 or 1,000 others who would be next in line for that same impression. Often you see in retail media that particularly the endemic partners, the ones who are already working with the retailer, as the owner of the retail media network, you have to pay them special attention. So maybe just before we get going on the other questions I want to ask, you can talk about that relationship, because to me, that's one of the biggest differences from a retail media network compared to broader digital.
That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up, the endemic versus non-endemic. So some retailers, like a Home Depot, I was just at their upfronts yesterday, and with a couple of small exceptions, it is only endemic brands advertising with the Home Depot. That's their priority, and it really makes sense for them. So that's compared to some of these other commerce media players where it would be a much bigger share of their sort of ad dollars are coming in through non-endemic. And it's certainly an area that, like an Amazon has been trying to build up their non-endemic advertiser value proposition for years, because that's totally untapped potential. And it's a great point about, with a retailer and a brand, it's a strange relationship. In the old days, the brand was the one selling to the retailer. They were trying to get into the store. They were trying to curry favor with the merchants. And today, the retailer is selling to the brand, and they're trying to get them to buy this media property. And sometimes there is a little bit of tension there, because the brand, you might hear this thrown around when it comes to retail media, is that retail media is a tax. I have to spend this money. This retailer is making me spend money. They're either putting it into our annual negotiations, or it's just a little bit of a, sort of leaning on them a little bit. So it can be overt, or it could be implicit. And that's what brands obviously really don't like, is spending money where they feel like they don't have a choice.
Got it. Okay. Now, when you and I first met, I remember one of the things that I enjoyed most about our conversation was this idea of how do retail media networks grow? And I mentioned that I'd come up with a framework where they start out in a certain way and they start to hit very well-defined limits, whether it's the sales team limit or whether they go off network for the first time. And I saw it as a path to maturity. You have a different model. And I know in an article that you put out, you talked about the retail media doom loop. So can you, given that we've just talked about the fact this is big, it's a growing space, can you just walk through that concept and talk about the challenges that retail media networks can get into and why it is potentially a doom loop?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Before we jump into that, I want to point out that retail media and commerce media has become this very exciting proposition, because, like a lot of publishers of the past, they look at they realize we've got these assets. We have eyeballs. People are coming to our site. They're coming to our store. Wow, we've got this whole other business that we could stand up. And I'm not going to name and shame, but I have heard of some commercial enterprises that really should not be in the media business at all, are considering this, because it seems like easy money, right? And we'll get into why that is not the case. With retail media overall, it has been growing very quickly, but the growth is decelerating. So I'll just pull up some numbers here. So eMarketer did a forecast for US retail media ad spend to be at $70 billion in 2026, but it's no longer this. I believe it was plus 20% growth each year, and it has slowed in the last year or two. Which gets me to this idea of this doom loop, because the easy money that retailers may have been able to tap into when they first started these media networks has dried up. What happened in the initial stages of a retailer setting up a retail media network is funds that were previously flowing through to their trade marketing spend and shopper marketing immediately popped up into the retail media P&L, because suddenly there was something that was measurable, programmatic, and they were being asked to contribute here. And so a lot of brands are like, why not? Let's try it out. And shopper marketers, I spoke with a number of them last year on the brand side for a separate piece. Shopper marketers have loved this evolution towards retail media because it is measurable. They can modify a campaign in flight. This is all the stuff that they always wish that they had at their fingertips, now digital. So they want to move in this direction. So that was the initial sort of bump that a lot of retailers got to their media networks, is from a different pocket. But eventually that, the well runs dry there, growth slows. And what is necessary for a retail media network in order to attract new dollars and tap into new parts of a brand marketing budget is better technology to access different types of ad units, different parts of the purchase funnel, more awareness campaigns, actually proving results of these campaigns. And so all of that requires a bit of investment from the retailer, but they're meanwhile seeing this growth slow down. So the person in charge of the retail media network at this retailer, they're showing growth is slowing, but we should really be investing more in our people and our technology and our processes to get this going. And that's where things kind of start to slow down, because the enterprise may not have really bought in properly to this retail media concept. The merchants who are in charge of what's in the store and what gets bought, then not always in favor of this either. We can get into that. And as a result, the media buyers on the other side don't see what they need coming through the platform. And so they just kind of, they pull back, or they spend with other retailers who are making a bit more of an effort, and the doom loop is perpetuated that way.
It's interesting because you've touched on a number of different dynamics. One, that often retail media networks are started as sort of a secondary business that's viewed as potentially more profitable than the primary business, but without necessarily a long-term plan of how to build out all the right capabilities and people, particularly around the technology. And so do you see an underinvestment in that technology as this goes on? And if so, how does that manifest?
Yeah, I think that the initial sort of tech stack that retailers jumped in with from a few years ago, there were a lot less options. Even going back 4 or 5 years ago, we have a large number of SSPs and ad servers dedicated almost exclusively to retail right now. We have a lot of different sort of technology layers and options that are available. 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. And so it might be an instance of a typical kind of technology buying cycle where you get locked into something that quickly gets superseded in terms of like the best in class kind of technology for that thing. And that might have been an issue. Another is the sort of is managed services as an entry point, and that might be a really great entry point for a retailer to dip their toes in. But eventually, the big spenders in media want to access their own self-serve platform. They want to be able to initiate and manage and measure their campaigns themselves and pull that back into their own reporting models. And so these are a couple of things that hold that maturity back.
Is part of that the fact that the owners of the retail media networks haven't thought about how to grow beyond their owned and operated in order to sort of have that relationship with the partner, whether it's very mundane stuff like identity matching in terms of the lists of their own customers? Is it that they just haven't thought about these types of issues when they're setting up the retail media networks? Or what's the barrier to anyone who's not the biggest, Amazon and Walmart? What's the barrier to them growing and sort of embracing those technology solutions?
Yeah, I think, since you bring up Amazon and Walmart, they're really the 500-pound gorillas in the room, especially Amazon. It accounts for over 70% of retail media ad spend goes through Amazon. And so you can't really say retail media without saying Amazon. And Amazon has played a very distinct and different game for the last 10 years when it comes to media. There is a good argument to say they're not a retailer at all. They're a media company and a cloud technology company that uses its retail business to actually pull in all of this data that they're using to run those other businesses. I think what a lot of retailers look at in the US when they think about setting up a media business is they look to Amazon because they're the biggest, and it's a lot of sponsored product ads. It's largely on site. Amazon's made a huge effort and a very successful effort to expand beyond that, which we can get into. But in the UK and Europe, retail media first began in the store, and they have a very sophisticated ecosystem around in-store retail media with digital displays, paper. This goes back a long time. It's not like we never had paper displays in the US either, but that's where retail media kind of started. Whereas in the US, retail media kind of really took off with sponsored product ads on Amazon, on Best Buy, on eBay. And so the context of what retail media is a little bit different. But I would say that for a lot of retailers with a robust store network, people coming in and browsing, or frequent visitors, or very dedicated category shoppers, that would actually be a better place to start or invest, is actually in the store, where you have a defensible asset and an engaged customer that is really, unique for a brand advertiser.
We're spending time on technology, and I guess I'd implicitly assumed that was a pain point. But let me ask you then, from the advertiser perspective, from the marketer perspective, engaging with the retail media networks, what are the biggest pain points that they see? Is it technology stack? Is it the business model? Is it the lack of reach, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think that these things are all related, because the technology decisions affect access for the media buyer. I'll say, before I did this, I founded and owned a marketing agency for. I was involved with that business for 9 years before leaving in 2024, and that was initially focused entirely around Amazon. So we did Amazon all day, and then Walmart sort of started to pick up pace with its marketplace and add Walmart Connect ecosystem. And then Instacart came out blazing fast with a self-serve model in 2020, and that was super excited. And it evolved very quickly from that point, from a retail media standpoint. And I'll just say, my decision framework as an agent, a small independent boutique agency owner, where do we invest time learning a new platform and ecosystem and ad buying network and everything? It has to be self-serve. that was, and that cut out so many options, but that was really just a very sort of simple heuristic for, is this retail media network at a level of sophistication where they can handle a lot of media buyers, and the type of brands that we were working with at the time were largely mid-market as well. So we did not have the sort of the bandwidth or the interest from our clients to work with managed service companies that only offered managed service. So that's a huge sort of equalizer. Is there a managed service capability? And that is something a lot of retailers are working towards. And is this media available to purchase through the places that I already buy media? Is it in the DSP? Can I buy it through the DSP that I typically buy through? Can I buy it through the front end of a PackView or a Sky or a Flywheel? These are all the big hitters in the retail media space. Can I buy it through there? And then that's really where the demand opens up to a retailer, is when the media is measurable, easy to buy, and that's, in terms of not even capturing the long tail, but capturing the mid tail, that's critical.
And you spoke earlier about how the tech stack has evolved, the market has evolved. How many retail media networks, other than Amazon and Walmart, would check the box on all the things that you just mentioned in terms of being able to easy to buy through those interfaces? Is that the majority of retail media networks now, or is that the exception?
That's a great question. Look, there's no one can count all the retail media networks right now. There's different counts out there. I think in the US it would be pretty safe to say there'd be like 70 to 90 retail media networks, and worldwide maybe 250. Out of all of those, how many would be self-serve out of all of those? I couldn't confidently give you an answer. Home Depot, for example, when I was first looking at that as an agency person back in 2020, I don't believe it wasn't self-service back then. But just going to their upfronts yesterday, everything is self-service with the exception of maybe their in-store network that they are massively investing in, because they have gone from a very sort of scrappy managed services team to now they've made huge investments in technology over the last couple of years to now everything is self-service. They recognize that is where the demand is going to come from. If they want brands to be investing in offsite and creative and updating their brand pages, they need to make that easy for them. They need to cut the timelines down and they need to get out of the way. But that obviously requires a lot of investment in technology.
About to answer, or you may have already answered the question I want to ask you, which is we started talking about the doom loop and some of the challenges that retail media networks face as they grow. How many do you think are going to effectively manage their way through those challenges, and what differentiates the companies that will succeed and will still be around in 5 years versus those that 5 years from now say, we tried it, we thought it would be profitable, it's just too much work, we're walking away?
Yeah, I think this is definitely where we haven't seen a flood of this happening yet, but I do think that it is coming. It is, despite for some of these organizations, despite the very best efforts of very smart and ambitious people leading the media business, they're not able to get the rest of the organization on board. There's internal misalignment and philosophies about what kind of company are we? We're a retailer. We exist to sell, to have a great customer experience and provide a great assortment, and the media piece of it was never really a true priority. I think that's gonna, the chickens will come home to roost with a lot of those. I think there's a number of different outcomes here. Actually, the IAB in the US is I know that Colin Colburn, who leads the commerce media group at the IAB, has come up with a very thoughtful set of recommendations about sort of what the future looks like for some of these players that haven't achieved breakout scale, let's say, and not to say that they all need to be shut down, but there are some pathways ahead potentially with building or joining federations, allowing it to just be a managed service and being okay with that, and it's really more of a side quest than part of the main quest of the organization. Allowing the merchant organization to manage retail media, I think that's a very interesting and smart path for some of these retailers who have actually had a bit of internal misalignment between media and merchandising. Maybe it should, if it rolls up under merchandising, there might be a little bit more sort of buy-in behind it. So those are some of the recommendations. I don't want to steal their thunder, but they've put together some really good ideas on that.
I hadn't intended to ask this question of you, but since you've opened the door, you said federation, and I've
Yeah.
in my mind I've had the thought network of ad networks. The idea that
Yeah.
many of these small retailers are not at scale, and the only
Yep.
way they get to scale is by coming together. And it's all very easy for us to
Mm.
say that. There are obviously significant
Mm.
challenges, particularly around how do you share the customer identity in a privacy safe way.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
I think there's a huge opportunity there, but nobody's taken a run at it. Do you see that happening, or do you think that it's just going to be too difficult to pull together?
Uh, I really want to hear your POV on this, but I'm aware of that there are some successful federations in Europe. There was one in the US that was run by Cardlytics that was shut down recently. Like you said, it's very challenging with who ends up being the glue behind all of this. And you think about a data clean room company, that would be an obvious candidate. Then there's a question of incentives for them. And if you're a retailer joining one of these federations, does your value get diluted because you're not really like in control of your destiny? Does it give too much power to the identity spine provider? This is pure speculation on my part, but it is interesting to consider the idea that we haven't seen any one of these actually get stood up yet. So it might indeed be more
I
challenging
might
than it
have a
looks on the
chat to
surface.
you about this one off camera because I've
Okay.
got lots of thoughts. But I will say I think
Ooh.
we've talked about one of the barriers, which is
Mm.
the sharing of the identity. I think that's pretty large, and as you point out,
Mhm.
there are data cleanroom companies that can get around that. But one of the other challenges is the fact that when you bring some of these companies together, they have very different ad formats. They're potentially being
Mm.
displayed on different types of screens, and they have very
Mhm.
different economics. And so
Mm.
finding a way, I mean, even set aside retail media networks, just pulling together any network of ad networks, someone is always going to feel underserved. They're going to point to, I used to have my own sales team and they sold out my inventory. Now I'm part of this consortium or federation and I'm underserved. And maybe they are. But where I'm getting at is it's very hard to put the right incentives in place for all of the different participants in a federation or a consortium or a collective
Mm.
to feel like there's value over time, which is all. And again, the other way you can do it is to take a run at a joint venture, but then joint ventures have their own set of challenges associated with them in terms of how you share out the economic value. So I think it's an interesting question. I mean, I think someone will take a run at it, but it's going to require a lot of work to get through.
Yeah.
Nobody gets to come on the Yield Doctor podcast without asking a question about revenue, because at the end of the day, I always try to help people make more money. So if you were advising or working with someone, and I know you are more an industry commentator than a consultant or advisor, but if you were trying to give someone who is running a small to medium sized retail media network one or two pieces of advice about how they should be making more money, what are the top two or three things that come to mind?
My top one is to make it merchant aligned and get the merchants on board, because then they will sell the media for you. They'll sell it for you. If it's done in the right way, if merchant teams can see the value that this media is not competing with my shelf space, it's not we're not turning the website into Times Square. This is actually growing the category. This is a new tool that I can give my suppliers to help them reach customers and grow the relationship and grow the category. If you can get the merchants aligned, they will sell it. Now, that's like can be a very difficult internal politic game, so I'm not going to say it's easy, but that's where I've been hearing a lot more from, you know, from everyone. Honestly, I keep bringing up Home Depot because I was just there yesterday. Half of their agenda at their upfronts were merchants, because they kind of recognize how important singing from the same hymn sheet is to their suppliers. That's a big media network. I also hear from some of these the smaller media networks that is a point of differentiation for them is to have everyone at the table as part of the JBP and the agenda setting for the year. Is we have our merchant and we have our media person, we come up with a plan all together, and that is really affirming to the brand to know that they're not going to get a gotcha down the line. They're not going to like try, give away all of their margin and then be asked for more. So I think that's my number one tip is like getting the merchant team aligned, and then you can really work as a team and get better outcomes for both of you.
And so this is almost coming down to sort of interpersonal stuff. How have you seen the leader of a retail media network get that merchant team on board and establish that partnership? What does that process look like? How do they make that work?
I haven't been privy to those kind of direct, conversations. No one in their right mind would let me in the room.
No problem. As we come to the end of the time, I want to ask you one more question, because I think, like to be a contrarian, like I do from time to time.
Yeah.
If you had to pick one belief about retail media networks that executives currently have, but which you believe is wrong, what would that be and why?
Okay, I think that AI-enabled commerce is a serious threat to retail media that is not being taken seriously because the timeline doesn't really line up with the tenure of people running these media networks.
Say more.
Okay, so if I'm the head of a retail media network, I'm thinking about my numbers this year, next year, and that might be it. And this agentic, not even agentic commerce where bots are buying things for us, but AI facilitated commerce, AI enabled commerce. I'm doing my discovery in AI answer engines now. I'm not going to a retailer to figure out what type of hairstyling tool I'm going to buy. I'm doing that in ChatGPT. So that means I'm dropping less behavioral signals at a retailer. I'm not browsing, I'm not searching, I'm not leaving these clues behind me about my future purchase intent. I might still be buying that product on the retailer website, great, but all of that data stream that retailer had access to before is starting to disappear. And then also, like, the surfaces that these ads live on are getting less traffic and less time because I'm getting to the retailer later in my shopping journey. So I don't think that the retailers have any incentive to sound the alarm on this because they're going to spook their advertisers, and advertisers might start pulling out and, God, spend the money on ChatGPT instead. Like that, we don't want that. Not recommending that, by the way. But this is something I think is a serious problem. It is not short-term enough for anyone to really start talking about. But I'm sounding the alarm, and I think that what it means ultimately is retail media doesn't die, sponsored product ads don't die, but the places where they live get reconfigured. Where retailers need to invest in their ad inventory needs to change. They need to think about where are the durable surfaces, where can they be competitive, how can they have an honest partnership with brands to grow the category rather than this extraction tax kind of perception that there is now. So I think it is an opportunity for a reset of retail media. It's not necessarily the end of it, but we need to start talking about it now so we can plan for that future.
I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time. I mentioned at the start that you run the retail, let me get the phrase right, Retail Media Breakfast Club.
That's it.
And I know that you're recently expanded onto Instagram because I
Oh yeah.
followed your move there. What is the best place to follow you and find all the interesting insights that you have?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This is a great conversation. I love speaking with a fellow uh, someone who likes to kind of stoke the fire a little bit. I think we need more of it. You can subscribe to Retail Media Breakfast Club as an email newsletter, as a podcast. On LinkedIn, there is a newsletter. Those are places you can get these sort of snippets every day at 6 a.m. Eastern. And if you also like a little bit of a cackle at the expense of the industry and all the wacky, weird things that we believe and do in the advertising ecosystem, I've started doing some humorous sketch comedy as well on Instagram, as you mentioned. So those have been pretty fun to put together and have a little bit of, I think we need to laugh at ourselves a little bit more in this space.
Well, I have noticed and I appreciate it. And thank you again. I look forward to collaborating with you more. And thank you for taking the
Yes.
time.
Thanks, James. Bye.